So I'm just going to press record. Um, Welcome everybody again. My name is Barbara. I am the Executive Director of Dream and Green. I'm super happy to see so many people here today. I know it was, quick turnover. You guys just got back from your winter break, so we really appreciate you guys being here. I want to also just present Alexandra. Alexandra is the program manager, and she's the one that the teachers have been in contact with through the Green Schools Challenge. So she's helping run the program and me with all the technical stuff. And I might not do so well. We're really excited and really honored to have our presenter today that I'd like to introduce to all of you. Roberto Rovira is a full-time professor at FIU, and he's the chair of the Landscape Architecture and Environmental and Urban Design Department, or with LAEUD. He's also the principal of Studio Roberto Rovira. He's a registered landscape architect with a design, engineering, and fine arts background. And his teaching, research, and creative work explore landscape architecture through various lenses that focus on ecology and public space. Roberto earned the 2015 Emerging Voice Award from the Architectural League in New York, which is one of the most coveted awards in North American architecture. He has been the recipient of numerous design and teaching awards, including the National American Society of Landscape Architects Professional Award of Honor in Research, the Council of Educators in Landscape Architecture for Excellence in Design Studio Teaching, and recognition as one of FIU's top scholars in 2016 and 2009. He has been a lead designer in national and international projects, and his work ranges from environmental installations and completions of art commissions, exhibits, and landscape or architectural projects. So we're really happy to have him join us today for a quick presentation as a preview and background on the competition that you guys have bravely taken on. So I'm going to turn it over to him, and then we'll have questions, a little Q&A at the end. So hold your questions until the end, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Roberto.
Great. Let me share screen here. Awesome. Okay. Do you see the cover that says FIU Landscape? Great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Barbara, and thank you all of you for having me. It's a real pleasure. I had the opportunity to participate last year, and I was an incredible, exercise in seeing creative minds at work. And I think the Dream and Green program is excellent, and it actually is reflective of the kind of student that we look for in our program. So today what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about landscape architecture, because the students that we are recruiting for this, and we have a running list, and I'm excited to have a lot of interest from FIU. They're coming from landscape architecture and from architecture and interior architecture. We're assembling those groups of mentors. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about landscape architecture in particular, because of course it's something that I know well, but it's also quite consistent with the considerations that you have to have in approaching this project on coastal adaptation. That is something that we deal with as landscape architects all the time. And landscape architecture is a recognized STEM discipline, a strategic discipline by the Florida Board of Governors. My own background, as Barbara mentioned, I began in engineering, and I eventually found landscape architecture, and the rest is history. It really allows me to think poetically, artistically, but also technically about these spaces. So I thought I would include some images of landscape architectural projects. Not all of them are about coastal adaptation, but a lot of them think big and think holistically and think about issues that go beyond just an individual site or an individual object. So of course, I think you probably all know this project, right? Central Park in New York. This is one of the preeminent programs, a seminal program, or not program, but a project that was done in the 1850s by Frederick Law Olmsted in New York City, before there was anything that looked at all like what you see here. This is kind of a vision for what Manhattan was going to be, proposed and built in the middle of the 19th century, and the city grew around it, and now it is indivisible from what this city's identity is. Not too far from there, there's the High Line in New York City, and if you haven't had a chance to visit, hopefully at some point you'll get an opportunity to see places like these, but in particular the High Line, which is done by James Corner Field Operations in New York. It took an old railway that was basically in ruin and abandoned for many decades, and transformed it into the second most visited public park in New York. And what's really unique and beautiful about it is that it takes a space that was part of an infrastructure of mobility and turns it into this thriving park that accommodates public art, that accommodates public space, that accommodates all kinds of activities, theater productions, film viewings, etc., all by threading its way throughout the city. And then the reason I chose this particular image is because they decided to keep the remnants of the railway that used to go through this space as a way to link the past with the present. So I think that's something that as landscape architects we're always thinking about. You know, it's one thing to go in there, clear out everything and start from scratch. The clean slate approach is quite another to think of these spaces as spaces that are meaningful because of their history, because of the people who use them, etc. And this does an incredible job of that. Other examples, this was done by Michael van Valkenburg and Associates. This is Teardrop Park, and it takes this very sculptural approach to almost like a geological feature on the site, which is entirely made by hand, and creates a very dramatic moment in the heart of this park. Another example globally is Copacabana in Brazil, done by Roberto Burle Marx, another one of the forefathers of landscape architecture. And what's really interesting about this project is that we often think of monuments as being something that is vertical, and we have ideas of what a monument is. In this case, this is a horizontal monument, a monument that has this very identifiable graphic treatment of the paving. If you've been to Lincoln Road, you know that this is actually a design that was used there right by the movie theaters along Alton. It was done, that project was done by Raymond Jungels, and Raymond interned with Roberto Burle Marx. So it's kind of an interesting continuity that way. Another project which deals with this interface of water and land is this one, Xochimilco Park, Ecological Park by Mario Shetnin in Mexico City. I had the fortune of interning with Mario Shetnin many years ago as a grad student. And this was one of those projects, it's a very vast landscape. And Mario, the principal, was a pioneer in using this park as infrastructure to filter water. So these various planted structures that you see are landscape features, but they are also conduits of all the stormwater drainage from this park. It gets put through these and filtered through the plant material before it enters this water body. Mexico City is a city with incredible history, but one of the most unique aspects about it is that that city was founded on a lake, Lake Tenochtitlan, or Tenochtitlan was the city that was founded on it, but Xochimilco was this connection of lakes. And if you go to Mexico City today, I mean, this is progressively built over time by filling in this lake. And the reason why it was done in a lake as islands was as a defensive measure to stave off conquerors. So it's a really interesting history that way. And in this case, it connects land and water in a creative and beautiful way. On a more local and personal level, this is a project that I designed and that you can find in our campus at FIU. This is known as the Sky Lounge, and this used to be a project that was right in the heart of the oldest, second oldest building on campus. It was a rather dry courtyard, nothing but a few light fixtures, concrete, and red mulch, very uninspiring. And I was asked to reimagine the possibilities. And in thinking about how to do this, the space is actually 4 stories high. There's about 16,000 students that use the space daily, or I'm sorry, every semester. There's offices of people who work here. So to me, it was essential to create something that would be interesting from the ground, but also from above, that you could look down and appreciate the activity, that it would have the ability to intrigue you and hopefully give you a sense of a unique environment. And these nets are actually made of stainless steel and air plants. You find these air plants all across South Florida. They grow on trees. They don't require soil. And they're, in this case, I did them unanchored, untethered to the ground. So they kind of sway above you like as if you were underwater. And I designed these benches with a profile that lets you use it as a lounge chair or as a seating to recline. And all of this was designed and done. I had 4 student interns that worked with me and over 30 volunteers to help stitch together these plants and really transform a very dull space into one of the most visited and photographed spots on campus. So it is possible to do that. And especially when you have constraints and places that seem uninspiring, landscape architecture gives you the ability to rethink them and be very imaginative. You can also be dull, but it also, if you challenge yourself, you can create truly remarkable and unique spaces. And as a program and as very active folks in our city, our faculty, our students are quite engaged with things like these projects, like the Underline. The Underline, you probably know, runs along the edge of Miami under the Metro Rail. The first 2 portions of it were just completed, and it transforms a utility corridor, basically a 10-foot corridor or path, into this very active recreational space that has pedestrians and bikes, etc., with lighting, with graphics that are unique to this, with the consistent design eye that lets you experience something for 10 miles all the way from Miami River down to South Miami. So this is coming into place, and I've had the fortune of being part of the design advisory committee, on the board of the Underline, and really seeing something that began as a simple, actually student proposal that was actually transformed into a real project. This is another example of a project that we're involved with. One of our faculty, Ibrozer, has been part of this effort to transform an old railway into this trail. And our students and faculty are also doing very, I think, remarkable things. This was the first place in an Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Rainworks Challenge. This was a national competition that FIU Landscape did with the engineering school. And we won first place in this. It's looking at how you can take the water that is normally dumped into stormwater systems and really allowing them to be seen, to be collected, to become features that go beyond just being utilities and actually give you a much stronger sense of place. So that's something that I always encourage our students to think about. I think for many projects, we tend to think of it in a binary way, like here's an engineering solution and here's like an aesthetic solution, and like you handle the water, you do the structure, and you kind of forget about it. And we're changing that paradigm, because if you're able to create spaces that perform well, that fulfill the requirements of engineering and still create public space, that is the opportunity to be truly transformative in the way that we think of our cities, in our environments, in our communities. And so that's what we try to do in our department. Another area, I was fortunate to be one of the finalists on World Changing Ideas for Fast Company. This was a competition that had over 3,000 submissions, and my research has to do with creating visualizations of ecosystems. So you can look and understand how the various dynamics of the natural world change. The flowers, the butterflies, the fish, all these things we understand as individual things, but my project looks at them holistically, so you can see these patterns together and truly understand what an ecosystem is all about. So those are the kinds of research that we're doing. And to me, the Dream in Green project and landscape architecture, to me, are so compatible. I always think of it as being, these challenges as being in the right place at the right time, and with landscape architecture as the right career, because we tend to think, again, very holistically, not just one-dimensionally. And in a place like Miami and South Florida and South Beach, we really have an amazing place in which to study, because we have 2 national parks, Biscayne Bay, the Everglades, and then we have our city, the urban context right there. I'll switch gears very quickly to the to this little video about our program. I don't know, can you hear the audio? All right, so I had to switch gears because I don't think you can get the audio in my presentation, but of course, we're very proud of what, of our program and everything we do. And a couple of the slides that you saw in there, we have a specialty in this region in tropics and subtropics. And I think of the need to really challenge ourselves to come up with solutions for things like coastal adaptation, resilience, and sea level rise and climate change, all of these very difficult problems. And a lot of them are happening in this band where we specialize. This is where, almost 2/3 of the world is going to be living by 2100. So if we can position ourselves to think creatively and come up with solutions like the ones that we're going to hopefully work with you to come up with, it really puts us, gives us a leg up on this challenge. So I just had a few more slides. We have super students. We get an amazing recognition for our work globally, nationally, locally. We participate in a lot of community events, a lot of community activities. We really practice what we preach. We travel. Right now, of course, with study abroad, our program is on pause until things kind of settle with COVID. But our kids get hired. We were actually the 14th in the country for most hired from landscape schools. And we have an incredible faculty that is practicing, that is constantly pushing the envelope, and allows us to do all these great things that I shared with you. So I'm gonna, I think, jump ahead because you've seen a lot of these. And in there, I have another a video about the college, but maybe that can wait. My hope was today just to kind of give you a window into thinking about the kinds of disciplines that are out there that let you broaden your, I think your horizons in how to think about things. And the challenge before you, we're going to have you guys building models, working with some of our students, designing and thinking not just about the structure, but also about the context, and having these things together as a design problem allow you to create solutions that are far more equipped to be transformational and enduring. If you only think of it as an architectural project or a building project or a garden project or an interior project, you miss out on a lot of what it could be. If you think of how all of these things relate to each other, how the interior has to relate to the exterior has to relate to the ecologies and the infrastructure of systems outside that are much larger than a site, Biscayne Bay, all of these things. If you think of it with those questions first, your solutions will be much better and much more impactful. So I think I will end there, and I'm happy to answer questions and about anything. And I will put in, if I haven't put in already, enough plugs. But obviously, you guys are engaged in this exercise, and we would love to know more about you. And I think that if you're interested in Dream in Green, you would love our program. So I hope that you'll reach out to me, and hopefully we can get some portfolios from you. If you're doing this project, you probably fit in very well with our students at the School of Architecture. So anyway, thank you. And Barbara, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Roberto. Alexandra, I guess we'll open it up, right?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Roberto, feel free to jump in, or you can drop them in the chat if you'd rather do that. But we definitely have a couple minutes to take some questions.
What's the year of most of the students? I'm curious. Where are they in their high school careers?
So from what I saw and shared, I think we have a kind of a sprinkle of everything. We have a couple of 10th graders, a couple of 11th graders, and I think at least one senior that introduced themselves. And so what the idea is, and kind of wanted to check in since we have the representatives from the teams, check in if they've gotten their teams together. I think that that's the number one thing. You can have up to 5 people in your team. And so if, you don't have to have 5, you can work with just 2 or 3 or, by yourself, but hopefully, if you get up to 5, it would be great. I know that some teams haven't started working yet because of restrictions with meeting in person and all of that stuff. I know that some teams are meeting virtually. And so I guess my question, and maybe that's a question that maybe some of the teams have, is for you, Roberto. What timeline do you think for the mentors to start? When can teams expect for us to match them with mentors?
So we already have a number of students who are on board, and we have a meeting, start classes next week. So we're making the announcement at our kickoffs, and I asked by Friday at noon of next week to have the list of students. So I probably, the following Monday or so, I should be able to give you a roster of interested students, and we can start pairing them up. And I shared with them the timeline, and I believe the final presentations in February is the 27th or something.
Yeah, I
Sometime
believe it's the last weekend in February. So I guess that would be the
27th.
the 27th. Yep.
Yeah.
February 27th.
Right.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I think that gives us enough runway to be able to do it. I think one of the silver linings of having to do it through Zoom is it's a little bit more flexible in terms of getting people together. But I know that I also shared with the student leaders the January site visits, of which there's 2, right? That you were planning.
Yep. So we actually were right now gonna share this with the students. Alex, do you want to give them a little info?
Yeah, so I think I sent it an email to your teachers, but Vizcaya has graciously offered to host private tours of the museum and gardens in relation to this project. So we'll be sending out an email, and I'll also drop it in the chat below for anybody who wants to sign up. It's definitely, whatever's to your comfort level. They were gracious enough to host this in person, but if you're not comfortable, that's fine as well. They definitely have a lot of online 3D tours that you can take as well. But so then we've set up a sign up that you can do, and it'll be just with your school teams. It won't be with anybody else. It'll be a private tour to keep it small and keep it, social distancing as well.
You can, obviously a family can come, so you can bring a parent in case, we have some of the younger students can't come, can't come alone. You are more than welcome to, with your team, bring a parent to come. Teachers are also welcome, teaching coaches. If I know some of you are kind of far away, so it is going to take place. There's 2 separate Saturdays that are coming up in January. And
the
so
23rd and 30th.
Yeah. And, Vizcaya can really serve as a case study for what the project. We're hoping that you get inspiration from that. And maybe, Roberto, that's another question if no other students have, and again, please feel free to ask. But, what would you say would be other case studies that they might want to take a look at with this theme of building a coastal, near the coast?
Sure. So there's a few excellent projects that will give you, I think, a broad insight into what to think about. The scales, the sizes of some of these projects are going to be much larger than probably, we will be looking at. But if you look at the the Rebuild by Design competition, Rebuild by Design was a competition that was sponsored by Sean Donovan from the Housing and Urban Development during the Obama administration, and it created a forum and a couple of $1 billion allocated to think post-Hurricane Sandy how to handle various coastal sites in the Northeast. And one of my favorite solutions is by a company called Scape, SCAPE. The principal, Kate Orff, she's actually on the board with me at the Landscape Architecture Foundation. And I would recommend that you take a look at Scape's work, and that you also go to the Landscape Architecture Foundation. Let me see if I can pull it up, because one of the nice things, and I've been with the LAF for 5 years now. I'm the vice president of leadership for LAF, and I was on the VP of research up until last year. And it's an organization that has so many resources. You have this foundation, right? And you can look at all of these things. But if I go back to the previous page here, there's a whole series of case studies on landscape performance that have evaluated real projects for how well they do on a number of factors. So the case study investigation is an index of all of these. So I can, show you a little bit of that. And I will post some of these, some of these examples. But basically, what it is it looks at all of these projects and starts to understand, how well do they work for, in terms of stormwater drainage or coastal defense, resilience, or community, et cetera, community engagement, and it quantifies them. So it's a really valuable set of resources. So I will share that with you, and things like these case studies that can be looked at with great detail. For example, you can look at project types, and you can look at waterfront redevelopment, let's say, and you can look at any one of these projects. And let's take a look at. I'm gonna pick some that I'm familiar with here. I mean, a lot of these are just wonderful examples. But let's see some. Maybe you've seen some of these, and I don't want to pick all of them that are in New York. So let's look at the Barangaroo. I mean, and again, the scales of a lot of these are going to be quite large, but there's also smaller ones. So here, it took this waterfront, which, as you can see, was mostly building grounds and asphalt, and it turned it into this. It gives you statistics, it gives you methodologies, it gives you all kinds of information about how the sustainable strategies were used, what was the challenge, what were the lessons learned, who participated. You can really lose yourself in a lot of these, but you can also be very specific about it. So for example, waterfront, Erie, let's look at Erie Street Plaza, for example. So here, we can look at what a typical site plan looks like, what happened there, what did they do. This was done by Stoss. This is in Green Bay. And it has all kinds of references there. So, you have things like that. You have, and there's tons and tons of briefs that you can review. So I would look at that. Scape, which is the firm that I mentioned, they are quite prolific, and they have a ton of projects that a lot of them have to do with the edge, the edge of the urban land water interface. So here you can go through and see, this is the Rebuild by Design Living Breakwaters. This is the one that I was describing. So these folks did a series of strategies that weren't just at the edge of the water. They actually went out and created these really cool barriers or reef islands that broke up some of the storm surge that you would get, but not thinking of it only as defense, but rather as an opportunity to create habitat for animals and wildlife and kayaking opportunities. The company that helped them with that, because this is of course a large team, it's called eConcrete. They're based in Israel and New York, and we've become friends over the years. they're marine biologists, and they came up with this concrete admixture that when you add it to concrete, it allows you to create concrete that allows for living things to thrive. So it's using what is the typical design idea of concrete for protection, and concrete for protection, but also for improving habitat and the ecologies of that region. Another great resource, and I know it might seem overwhelming, so don't worry to look at it on your own, but wedge guidelines. Let's see, this is a really cool resource that's about waterfront edge design. And so here you can look at a series of let's see if I can jump into I don't want to go into that, but let's see, projects here. So verified projects, it gives you kind of like a menu of case studies that are specific to the water's edge. So again, a lot of these are kind of large, so you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's helpful to see a few of them that you really like, see what kinds of strategies they used, and and dig in. There's all kinds of really helpful things. They have a resource. Let me see if I can find it, which is a little booklet manual, right? So the wedge manual, you can go through and look at how they think of a site and what you have to consider. How do you incorporate people? So this is a good, and it's a nicely designed resource. Again, can be a little overwhelming, but I think if you just take a peek at a few of them, I'm going to advance to some of the guidelines a little further down. So, for example, the ideal waterfront contains a balance of resilience, access, and ecology, right? So if you have water accessibility, you can get the public there, really important. Not only is it good because you can do recreation and all that, but it builds awareness, right? What is out of sight is out of mind, right? And so if you create opportunities for people to be exposed to their environments where things are, happening, like if you have a polluted edge, or you have an inaccessible edge, or you have a very vulnerable edge, or you don't have the proper protection for storm surge, etc. If you don't experience that, you don't see it, then it's somebody else's problem. So accessibility gives you multiple benefits, potentially recreation, but also awareness, and also engagement. Some of these projects are really good at involving the public in their solutions. So they will have people come out and help to revegetate an edge or do mangrove restoration. These are all things that are less like a physical project, object, but rather it's a more social infrastructure that you build into a design. So that's that's something that is helpful. And there's diagrams that you can look at all of these and pick and choose. Once a lot of the answers that we seek as designers come from the site. So once you identify a site, you see what's involved. And our students are really good. We I think have trained them well. I'd like to think in kind of focusing on the things that are important. It can be overwhelming to try and consider everything in a project, but our student mentors will, I think, help you prioritize and develop a series of constraints for your proposals. Something that I tell the students too is that oftentimes when you're confronted with a design challenge, there's an initial tendency to try and solve everything and do everything and throw everything in the kitchen sink into it. And sometimes sites cannot sustain that. Sometimes the solutions that we put out there, if they're not thoughtfully orchestrated together, then they compete with themselves. There's not enough room to do what you want. So I tell students that a sign of maturity as designers is getting to a point where you know what to edit out, right? You know what to do, where to focus, what is a priority, and then think long term, right? You might be able to do some things today, and some things in a year, and some things in 10 years. So you really have to think about that long continuity of how your actions can lead to something down the road, even if you're not able to on day one to have all the fish, all the habitat. That's just not going to happen because the natural world operates on its own rhythm, right? So you just have to keep that in mind. And as long as you know that these things are going to happen, you're starting a process. I like to think, there's a process that you're beginning as a designer that gives these environments a resilience because you have anticipated these changes and you're not trying to do everything at once.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question for Mr. Rovira.
Yes.
So it's a bit unrelated to the overall message that you were sending, but you had mentioned that did you take part in the design of the Sky Lounge, or you designed the Sky Lounge at FIU?
Yes, I designed the Sky Lounge.
So I was wondering if there was a change in not the physical environment, but the emotional and almost spiritual environment of the campus when implementing the Sky Lounge.
I like to think so. And in my I should probably try and do a case study investigation on it to assess this in a more quantitative way. But I will tell you that because there are so many kids who use that space before class, after class, getting ready for tests, etc., the nature of that environment is such that it's a very calming one. And you get a lot of students who are there and you can see them, like, it's quiet. I designed it so that the ground had a textural change. It uses recycled blue glass. I can maybe show you a few more images of it. Let me see if I'll go to my website, which is just myname.com. And it's designed so that it has a very, I want to say, meditative quality. So let's see, I'll show you a few images to try to show that. So this is the before, this is the after, this is immediately after it was built, right? So concrete, red mulch, lighting, and here we changed it to these nets. We planted these vines called sky blue vines. We use a recycled glass on the ground, design this, and and people just gravitate toward it, and they chill out, they lounge in these spaces. And this is afterwards with about a year or two after, with the vegetation just a lot softer, the rustle of the leaves, the ground, it's not concrete, it's like this rougher texture. The profile of the bench, which the bench, I don't know if you noticed, one faces in and one faces out. So it's the same profile, but it just flips that relationship. And it's really cool because it's a very flexible design. And yeah, so I'm relaxing on it.
Where did you get the inspiration to do this project?
Well, I knew that space before it was a Sky Lounge, and it's known as a brutalist style, which in and of itself is a little off-putting, like when you think about it. It's brutalist style is this very heavy concrete, big sort of proportions. I was at FIU for 8 years, I think, and I used to go through this space all the time. And that happens. I mean, as a landscape architect, I think of like whenever I go through a space, like I always think, oh, I could do this. Wouldn't it be great if you just added a chair here? Like, wouldn't that, And that's kind of like the critical thinking that you go through. But I was familiar enough to know what the issues were. And it was very problematic because people just walk through. There's not even a place to sit. They have these benches at the end, which we kept, but it's like it was very unfriendly. And so I knew that space enough. And then the other thing that you do as a designer is assess the conditions there. So the one thing that it had going for it, in addition to the fact that there's so many thousands of kids that use it every semester, is that you have this 4-story atrium or this courtyard space that's covered by a skylight. So you can kind of see it, that skylight. Well, actually, it's not the best view. Let me see if I have that. This one. And so you have this big proportion that was open. I knew that we couldn't really I didn't want to create anything that would be too heavy because, I mean, we got it engineered and everything, which is great, but each one of these weighs about 200 pounds, which is not much at all. And but yet it's cable, so it expands and it's very airy and open. So you're not going to get a wind knocking it against the wall very much. And it's and they're sculptural and they kind of cover that space without intruding upon it. So I wanted to create something that had this gentle feeling to it. And then I just started sketching. I don't have any of the sketches here. Let me see, maybe I'll show you a little bit of the process. Let me see. I didn't have that in the plan to show you, but I'm more than happy to see if I can get lucky and find some of the Sky Lounge sketches. So I just sketch, I go out there and I sketch. And in sketching it just very loosely, these shapes came up. Actually, this one. Let's see. Yeah. So let me see if I can get to the full. Let me see if I can get to the full. Yeah. So this is my sketchbook. One of my sketchbooks, and I'm constantly. That's one thing I tell my students: always carry a pen and a sketchbook, unless it's a funeral or a wedding. That's the only time when you're excused from having one by you. And whether it's a sketch or you're writing something, it's important that you document your thoughts. These are some other projects. This was for an exhibit on sketching, but yeah, so here you go. So I have this really long sketchbook, and I just turned it sideways and I drew this shape. And I knew that I wanted to create furniture that related to this superstructure above. So in my mind, the furniture is not just standalone. The furniture actually includes this canopy because it directs your view up. And I felt that was really important. And I also felt that, that's the sketchbook there. These are different things. But I also felt it was important to have a profile like this that lets you lie down or sit. This evolved, obviously. But it's all about, iteration, which is what I tell my students. It's like you sketch it once, sketch it again, sketch it again, sketch it again. You never get over the fact that you have to be perfect. Don't make perfect the enemy of good, right? If you try to be perfect, you will paralyze yourself, right, from exploring ideas. And then just sketch over things. I mean, a lot of these sketchbook images are just playing around. This was actually for a competition, and I didn't know what would happen. Like I wasn't sure exactly how that would be, the final version, how that would be, but I just started to sketch, and that was it, until I arrived at that particular design. And I carry my sketchbook all the time. I mean, here, let's see if I can find. So this is always in my backpack. Let me turn off my, see if I can, how do I do that? Turn off my background stuff.
And while you're doing that, are there any other questions? I know we're almost running out of time, but I just want to make sure. I thought I had seen somebody else wanting to ask a question.
On your website, is there like an email or a way to contact? Because if you were to do a case study on the emotional impact of the Sky Lounge, I'd really like to see the results of that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, you can contact me in the just from this the email that I posted on here. So rovira@fiu.edu. That's my FIU email. At the same time, if you go to the site, just in contact, I think my studio email is in there, studio@robertorovira.com, or you can write one of these. But yeah, that's a good idea to do that study. I think that's you have planted that seed, so I need to pursue it. All right, other questions before I go off on another tangent.
I wanted to know what is the preferable material to build the model.
Right. So our students are going to be, I think, very helpful in this. Usually, the materials that we encourage the students to use are chipboard or basswood, things that you can get at Blick, or Utrecht, or I guess there's not Utrecht anymore, but Jerry's Artorama, things like that. I tend to avoid or discourage students using pre-made like models of trees or people, or I think it's more important to me to be able to get the sense of things by having the act of modeling become something that you have to think about. Okay, so if I'm doing a model of a wetland, I want to get that texture, so I'll go to IKEA and I'll buy a welcome mat, and I will cut that welcome mat, and I will use that texture. I will use basswood. I try to keep things rather monochromatic, but monochromatic, like no really loud, sort of shiny, colorful things, because a lot of times those tend to take away from the idea of a design. I don't know if let me see if I can get lucky and find a model that I can show you here. That's a good example. Might be tricky, but to just do this on the fly, but our students will be really helpful. You can use paper, you can watercolor paper, and you can dye paper, glue, like you can do all kinds of interesting things that way. Here, let me pull. I'm in my studio, so I can maybe pull a couple of quick examples. Give me a second.
And while he's looking, I just want to remind that Dream and Green is reimbursing for the cost of the materials. That all you'll have to do is fill out an application through our Green Leadership grants, and then we'll reimburse you for those materials. So, but like he said, the student mentor will help you identify the best materials to use for your models.
And just to clarify with the student mentor, and this will, as Roberto mentioned, we're going to get you guys matched pretty quickly. They will be, we hope that you guys will meet virtually at least twice before the competition date that we mentioned that will be at the end of February. And so with your mentor, talk to them about your site, what you're thinking of building there, what, kind of the scale of the project that you want to do. Like Roberta was saying, do a bunch of sketches with your team, try to figure out which design ideas you like. And then once you have a design idea and you're building the model, there are various materials that you can use. You could try to see what you can repurpose that you have in your house. If your parents have a rug that they are looking to get rid of and they will allow you to cut it up, maybe that's something that you could use in your design. Do you have other examples, Roberto?
There's more than one broom or brush in my house that is missing like half of the bristles. I still hold on to those. And I showed that to my kids, a long time ago, and now everything is fair game. so like here, for example, this is a little model of a sculpture that I did, and this is basswood. Let's see, let me get that in camera here. So this is basswood, in different sizes, and then I printed these panels that had images on them. And I'll show you those models and then I'll show you the actual projects. This is another model that I did in this iteration of the project. This was going to be a bridge. Eventually it became a standalone piece. This was for a firefighting public art piece in Seattle. But you can see this is a cardboard tube that I dyed and sanded. This is a mesh, like a bronze mesh and wood, and it just kind of gets to that form. But I think this is a good opportunity to show you how something like that evolved. And both of these have a nice base, which I also believe in. They get a nice piece of wood and I put it on top, because in one case this is done in a pool. You'll see what it is in a minute. I'll go to the site and show you. I think actually this is a good exercise to share with you. Because you will see how a model serves only to get you somewhere. It's not a finished thing to replicate exactly what something looks like. So this is a Seattle public art project that I just mentioned. There we go. So this is a training facility for firefighters, and transportation and utility personnel. They work with very heavy machinery, equipment, often underground. They have these giant pipes underground that carry water, and they're very sculptural. So I took it out of the ground. I cut it in a particular way. I did a silhouette of a firefighter and this little fence. And this fence is actually American Disabilities Act requirement, so that you don't bang your head when you go under it, but it becomes almost like a hose that's floating. So it fulfills multiple aesthetic and functional things. And it's kind of like this ambiguity about, the firefighter going into the unknown. And this is a sketch where it began, right? And so you can see how it evolved from this model, right? It's in the same family, but it became something else. And then the other.
Roberto,
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of kids that had to log off, just to let you know, because I know that they had other meetings. So I don't, if any of you can stay a little bit longer, thank you for those of you who cannot, but we really appreciate everybody coming and hearing, and hopefully you got a lot of inspiration today.
Yeah, some of my students, they have after school programs they go to, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, no worries.
No problem. Yeah, I just want to wrap up. I'll show you this one image of this model, the glass hull. So this model became, are you seeing my screen? Became that. So this is a series of silk screened images onto the surface, and kind of gets it. This is the shape, right? and then this is what it became. So it kind of got me to here. Okay. All right. I think that's it. I'm happy to answer questions. I look
Amazing.
forward to getting to seeing you and your ideas evolve.
Great. Thank you so much, Roberto, for the presentation and for sharing a wealth of knowledge and a lot of examples. The students have your email, and we'll get in contact with them, with your teams soon. And this was recorded, so we will share this with the coaches that were not able to come today. And we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Wonderful. Okay, great to meet you all. Take care.